chain. So this makes it so that the fee is based on the expected amount of dividend that would be accrued in that tempo. So making this strategy ineffective. So that's something that's important. Coming out next week. I want to talk a little bit about Lolacost and 73 and our perspective on the way in which OTF reacted to those subnets. First of all, I would say that it's important to recognize that subnets on BitTensor are co-owned by the owners, the miners, the validators, and the TAO holders at large. There is a decentralized control structure by design inside those subnets. Subnet owners can write code, but that code doesn't need to be run by validators, especially if they perceive that the code is not beneficial to TAO at large, or maybe even the subnet at large. That's by design and important. That it's not just an autocratic rule on behalf of the subnet owners who have a very powerful position, and you could think of it as like a game theoretic centrality in determining what that mechanism runs. But ultimately, it's the validators who run the code. And for this reason, it is designed so that the validators can actually choose whether or not the code they're running is the code that they want to run. Sometimes they don't run that code, they just wait copy. But that's fine too. It's actually just a showcase of the fact that validators do have the ability to do what they want inside of a subnet. So for the LOL subnet, the way that we, our opinion was that this was not beneficial to the ethos of BitTensor. And we found other validators who agreed with us. We child keyed to OTF, and we ran effectively the inverse incentive mechanism. Instead of incentivizing miners to hold the tokens, we incentivize them to sell, which is ironically kind of a meme as well. People have argued that we shouldn't do that, but I think that it's a misunderstanding of the way in which token ownership works in BitTensor. Right now, Root has a good proportion of ownership in each subnets on purpose. We built it this way so that we could stop, just general attacks on the ecosystem, and that we could align the network towards goals that we all share. And that is the privilege that we have via the stakers in OTF. So that can also change, and is also liquid if people want to unstake from OTF because they didn't believe that we made the right decision by changing the subnet code. They are welcome to unstake, and we would hope that people would use that liquid democracy to do the same. A bit about 73. This one's slightly more difficult, and it was a decision that we made internally by noting that what the subnet owner on 73 had done was manipulate some of the pseudo call parameters that we had not considered as likely attack vectors, but were specifically the ability to make it to stop validators from setting weights. Our perspective is that setting weights in subnets should not be manipulated in order to censor individuals and censor stake operations. The goal of this developer was to make it so that no validators could actually validate on the subnet. And they were successful in the first 4 or 5 days of the subnet by manipulating the weight set rate limit, which means that you could only set weights every 60,000 blocks, which was about 9 days, as well as the staleness on weights they set down to 120 blocks. So every tempo, they would decrease the weights rate limit down to 0, set weights themselves, and then right before the epoch, use those weights to generate 100% of the dividends and 100% of the incentive back to their own keys, and stop other validators from doing anything in the network. We intervened as OTF by capturing the pseudo calls ourselves. So there's 2 keys that are capable of setting pseudo on a subnet. It's the OTF's global pseudo key as well as the subnet owner's pseudo key. So we we're able to break through set weights ourselves and then take over the Yuma consensus of the subnet, and push the funds to our own key, which we intended to simply burn. The subnet owner did not like that because he perceived that as an overstep by OTF, but I think it's, again, a misunderstanding of the way in which the co-ownership of BitTensor works. It was a particularly dangerous attack for a number of reasons. One of them was that because he was able to distribute all of the dividends to his own key, there was effectively no root cell pressure, which was unfair against other subnets because he was getting 100% of the root dividends. The day before, his key was getting the highest APR in the system, so he had to act quickly before he attracted too much stake, and it was effectively impossible for us to do this thing. Anyway, this has been fully patched, and as I understand it, I think the developer is selling his slot. This also stimulated a conversation in the ecosystem about the 18% for subnet owners, whether or not this is too low. I personally believe that it isn't. And we set this because we felt that it was a fair number. 18% over time is more than OTF, the founders at BitTensor, ever attained. And it's actually a substantial amount of token if you think long term in your subnet. 18% comes out to about 25% of the final supply of the 21 million. About 4 or 5 million tokens out of the 21 million, which is significant if the subnet owner is capable of waiting a sufficiently long time. OTF got around the fact that we did not have tokens to sell by writing contracts with accredited investors to the ability to sell future tokens that we did not have access to OTC. I think that this is a reasonable strategy for teams that are looking to bootstrap liquidity into their teams to pay for branding and hiring developers. There's something like 2.5 million tokens that a subnet owner will have after the first 2 years. If there is also some liquidity that's injected into the pool, but if this is being pulled out, it also increases the price, so it's a fair weather problem, and you have actually more liquidity at your disposal because of a higher price. So in the steady state, it is actually a substantial proportion of the networks you own. And I would urge builders to see the distribution into the validator set, the people that are staking, as well as the miners, as extensions of the companies they're building, and fold in the miner community into each of your subnets, which is something we did, and it was a very successful strategy. And I think that teams that do this will be highly rewarded by having aligned individuals who help them write code. Anyways, that's enough of my spiel there. I don't want to take any more time away from the two builders that are going to be speaking on stage today. So that's Zoro and Yuba. Why don't you guys raise your hands and we'll pull you up on stage. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So why don't we start with neural internet? Zoro, bit of an interesting story how you guys got into BitTensor. Why don't we start there?
Of course. Yeah. Do you mind if I just I bring up some of the superstars in neural internet?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, Don, do you mind just you could just raise your hand. There we go. Let's see. Ivan as well, and also Mohammed and Douglas. There we go. Yeah, let's kick things off. Don, feel free to introduce everybody, and then we can just start.
Okay, yeah, so we've got Ansel Zoro here. He is the, you might say, president of product We also have one of our lead developers, Ivan, and Mohamed. And Douglas is here as well. Douglas is kind of an old time, got a lot of experience with BitTensor and is a consultant with us. I'll have Ivan and Mohamed speak a little bit about proof of GPU because those guys are deeply involved with some of the technical aspects of that. But I could go ahead and explain some things about neural net real quick. Yeah, so we're a DAO built on BitTensor. We've been self-funded from the beginning through emissions of tau.
Hey, Don, your screen is not loading for me and for a
no?
couple people in the chat.
Okay,
Yeah, for anybody that can see it, please post screenshots in the chat.
Let me try again with entire screen. See what your stream is still running. We've paused your preview to save resources. It says. Can you not see my screen?
Unfortunately, we can't see it, Don. One thing that you can do very easily is simply take a screenshot of your slide if you're showing slides, Don, and just put them in the channel. That will show up in the recording, and also people can just see the images.
Can you see it now? Because it seems I can see it now.
I cannot.
Yeah, me either.
Okay, that's too bad because I have a big chart where I need to slide around to be able to explain things. Can I leave the meeting really quick and just come back and see if that helps? And if not, then we'll just continue the way it is.
Yeah, as well, and also maybe Zora, you could try to screen share as well. Maybe just be this guy. Or a link is sometimes valuable. People can just share, look at it in real time.
Yeah, that would work.
All right, Don should be back now. Hey,
Okay.
Don, let's try one more time. If not, let's just share a link or images.
Absolutely. Okay, give me 1 second. No, yeah, it says it doesn't want to share it, I guess. So. Okay, let me take a screenshot of each one of these and we'll kind of go over the basics of it. So
Also, Don, you can post a link just so then people can see it in real time as well, and they could slide around as we kind of discuss things.
yeah, give me 1 second to change the permissions on the link. So it's just view. Copy link. And if I can use this for reference, that'll be helpful. So let's see, where do we get chat in this? Chat. When you guys can see that, then I'll go ahead and continue. Are we good?
It's required to log in.
Boy, okay. Yeah, I see a couple people, but I guess anybody who doesn't have a Lucid Charts account might not be able to see it. So I will make an export of it, and I will put the SVG in chat. So let me get this real quick. Let's do that. Okay, so while I'm waiting for that to export, let's just get started with what we are, who we are. We are a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, and as such, we are able to use our token as stake for governance, as for economic purposes like transfer of value. Let me upload this really quick. Stop. Oops. Sorry for the late start here, guys. We're gonna in just a second. Okay, so you guys have the SVG there if you want to take a look at that. I'm not sure if it is going to have a white background, so you might have to find a way to get a white background on it. Okay, so we are a DAO, and the DAO is initially based off of stake and tau. We are going to restructure, and so that our governance is based on stake and our alpha token. And with that, then you'll have voting rights similar to how you do in Open Tensor Foundation to vote on proposals, etc. That's part of our economic plan, and we'll show why that's a good business model for us here pretty quickly. To continue on though, I just want to get into what our target market is. Right now, that is OS level model training. So if you need to log in and do train your models on a specific OS, you can do that. We're not distributed training where you can have multiple machines training the same model. We will be there in 2026. That's our goal for now. And there's several technical factors that are going to play into how we're doing that. So essentially right now, you are able to rent out a Docker container, same way you would possibly as RunPod or a lot of these other competitors. I think there's probably about 30 out there that I know of. And you can bring your own data, bring your own model, and then you'll be able to train it there on, say a machine with 8 H200s. That's going to cost you, I don't know, $250,000 if you're going to go out and buy the machine. So with us, you can get that right now for, I think we actually discussed today, I think I saw something about $12 an hour. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but I did see something in our chat about that today. Okay, so with our business model then is direct access to compute. And with that, we are kind of a middleman. We're not really into investing in models themselves or cleaning and prepping data, but we are just here to provide you the access to be able to do that. In the future, we will be moving away from just only OS level model training into using things like Run AI, where we're able to run Kubernetes clusters, and you'll be able to scale up to however many machines you have. And we'll be able to provide that as a service where you just bring your own model, bring your own data, but we can then provide the training for you across a wide range of machines inside of a cluster. Technology-wise, we have just been going through a big rebrand this year, and that's part of our goal of showing who we really are. Trying to improve the face, because we want cash flow is our most important factor in all of this. And if you think about crypto in general, that's where a lot of the naysayers are still at. Well, there's no cash flow in crypto. BitTensor, of course, as a lot of people understand, there's plenty of opportunity for cash flow, and to do that and to attract more business, that we're headed down the road right now of refacing things while we improve on reliability, which is another factor that a lot of distributed trustless compute environments are facing, which is reliability can be really difficult. Okay, so NodeXO is going to be our new website. Right now, it's still at our knowourinternet.ai website. We are going to rebrand to NodeXO. We do have some logos and are working on landing pages for that. 2.0 website will be done this year. We are in the process of doing that. Our team size does fluctuate with the price of tau, so it depends on how fast we're getting things done. Depends on how well our network is performing as well. So I can't give you an exact date on that, but it is well underway, and I have seen some of the pages, and they are quite attractive. I'm really happy with the way things are going. It's going to be really a clean, classy feel. I think we're also, NodeXO is going to be targeted towards the corporate market. So a lot of blockchain in general goes towards the dark themes. We're going to have a dark and light theme, but I think we'll default to light so that we can attract more people in a space outside of the traditional blockchain markets. Okay, so let's get into some of our roadmap here. According to things that I think that are really affecting the entire network, or not the entire network, but the entire industry, I should say. In trustless compute value or incentive mechanisms, trustless compute validation, this is a difficult one. It doesn't matter if it's just GPUs or it's storage or a lot of other RAM even. There's a lot of room for misuse, and so we have been spending a lot of time on things like proof of GPU. Our current proof of GPU service, I believe, is one of the strongest points of Subnet 27 and how we're doing that with Merkle tree proof validation. And through that, we're passing over a seed from the validators to the miners, and then from there they will run the model. We are able to look at those calculations because we've done analytics on what they should look like coming from specific models, and then are able to calculate what type of model they have. That's where we're at right now. This needs to become more sophisticated, and we have actually started to collaborate with other players in the market outside of anything to do with BitTensor, who have written white papers and are leaders in this area, because we've come to the same conclusions with where we want to go with it. And so we're actually talking right now about even starting an open source Python library to build this, to provide it for the world, actually, not just us.
Can you talk more about this? Can you talk more about this, Don? So how does the validation system work on the subnet right now?
Okay, so for GPUs,
Yes.
Okay, so like I said, we pass over a seed of the model for the Merkle tree. We don't pass over everything, because that way we don't overload our validators with creating these giant Merkle trees to pass over. At that point, the miner can build out the Merkle tree and then run the model on its machine at full capacity. When it runs it at full capacity, it should be able to pass with a certain benchmark, and that benchmark, or that specific score or range of score, will show us which model it is. I still think that's not complicated.
You mean GPU? It'll tell you which kind of GPU they're running.
Yes, based on their score, we've done analytics on what the score should look like coming from specific models.
And so
it's falling within that category.
So you pass over the specs for a machine learning model to train on a data set, and ask the miner to actually train that model and return the model, and then eval the model. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think I know Douglas probably knows the most about this. I don't know if he's in the meeting right now, but with the Merkle tree, like you have to build it out, and it's essentially arrays inside of arrays, right? So by the time you use up your entire GPU trying to calculate what the end result is, it's mainly the score that we're building that off of. But let someone else that's actually built it explain the rest of that. Let's see, who do we have here that can do that?
Yeah, Douglas is here.
Douglas, okay, yeah, Douglas I think is a good guy for it.
Yeah, I can do it, or Mohamed, if you want to talk about it. Basically, the seed is sent over by the validator, so we don't.
Has he raised his hand? Is he coming up on stage to discuss that?
Oh, he's in here now.
Can
you hear him, Cons?
No, I can't hear anybody except you and Don.
Hey, Douglas. Cons can't hear you. Yeah, I could hear you too, but I don't.
I can hear Cons.
Yeah,
Okay.
the chat's saying they could hear him as well.
Cons muted me.
Okay.
What about Mohamed?
I can't even see Douglas on the stage, actually.
That's weird.
Yeah, can I?
As Douglas, why don't you leave and join again? Can you do that, please?
There we go.
Oh, perhaps. No, I know why. I've just muted you. I have you now.
Yeah.
There you go. Go ahead, Douglas.
Okay, yeah. So basically, we'll send a random seed over to the miner to generate the Merkle tree, and then it's basically a challenge response workflow where the miner starts to basically compute, and then once it's done, they can send it back to the validator, and basically all it's trying to do is test for T-flops right now. And if we have a range of tolerance, and if they fall in that range, we can see this person has an H200 or this person has an H100, depending on their T-flops. And um, the reason we're doing it in this way is because it would be a burden on chain. It just wouldn't work. Validators doing full recomputation. So this is a way to kind of get around using the Merkle proof is a way to get around full total recomputation because the overhead for that is just too high. But we're still able to verify that they did actually compute the answer, and we can verify based on T-flops that they should be at an H200 or they have an A100 based on those numbers that we have.
And what exactly is a Merkle proof? Can you explain that? So it's a Merkle proof of what? So I'm a bit confused. So-
Hashes. So you've got arrays of arrays, and they've got hashes inside of them, and you have to calculate all of it. And it's exponentially bigger that every level you go, and with that you can really use up the full bandwidth of your GPU, and then calculate teraflops by how quickly it's able to do it.
Interesting. Okay, so this allows you to, yeah, right. So the speed at which they can solve this tells you what type of GPU they have available, and that they also, I imagine, need to have a certain amount of memory available on the machine to do it within a certain amount of time.
Exactly. We had someone show up with a 4090 a couple weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh, we were running another workload on it." And of course, it's gonna, your H200 is gonna look like a different machine if you're doing anything else on your machine at the same time. And this actually goes into how we're going to be addressing misuse, because we're going to start doing raids on groups of machines at the same time, so that if you're trying to spoof, you won't be able to, because you're not going to be able to pass two proof of GPU tests at the same time due to the way the scores come out. So if you're doing anything extra, it might not look like an H200. If you have an H200 and you're doing something else with it at the same time, it won't.
And when you're using these machines through this front end, like how does that work? You're given a key, you SSH into the machine, you use the machine. What stops miners from just flipping out the machine or changing the machine when you enter into the SSH?
Let Mohammed talk about that. We have been addressing it. So changing out hardware, and I know in the past month, actually, we had a couple tickets for that. I'm sure maybe Mohammed knows the end result. But ultimately, we do pass over proof of GPU tests often. So they shouldn't be able to swap out when they're not rented. During the tickets that we recently had for were detecting hardware swaps while they're rented. And that's something I don't have a perfect answer on at this moment. Maybe Mohammed or Ivan knows.
It's a hard problem. Because if the person is using the machine, you can't run the proof because you just have to kick them out of the machine in the first place. But it's still very. It's interesting that you have a foolproof method of determining what kind of computer they have behind the miner. So, what are you guys seeing right now for in terms of like the ratio between rented compute versus the amount that's on the network?
There's a real reliability issue right now. So that's the thing that we're going to be addressing in 2025. And there's multiple things we can do that. And I know it's not just us. It's outside of BitTensor, it's happening as well. You look at Clore. Clore AI, if you go to their market rental, every single machine says spot on it. It's because they're also a blockchain based network or service. And they recognize that they don't have any control over who's going to leave when. And that's one of the issues. We've also probably been dealing with some reliability issues, whether that's dealing with misuse, so people that are trying to misuse the network and just gain tau or alpha token and then not participate on top of that. So they just script it so they're dropping your rental, they kill your Docker container after 20 minutes or something, because they're not receiving any incentive to keep it running. And I can talk to you about what we're going to do to address some of those things. But right now, our rental rates are quite low because I don't feel like we have a really great reliability on the network. It has been as high as, I would say, like 15 to 20 when I go in and look. In the last couple of days, because of the things we've been dealing with, it's a lot lower than that. I know in September when we first started, a lot of people were testing it out, and there was also incentive to be rented. And at that point, there was only 1 or 2 machines you could get. That's changed though as we've moved away from 4090s, etc.
You guys are incentivizing H200s, H100s, just those types of machines, or like, and then how is that determined in the validator?
Based on the T-flop scores essentially, and this is where we can be able to like shift incentives based on demand. Like if the demand is saying, hey, look, we only want to pay for B200s because obviously that's the best machine for AI workloads, whether it's fine tuning, pre-training, or even just inference, then we can be able to essentially tweak the scores and only align the incentive to incentivize miners to plug in, for example, B200s. And that's why we've essentially cut out some of the older models, because at that point then we'll be wasting incentives, because in theory the demand isn't there, for example, for a 4090 compared to something like a B200. And that's how we kind of differentiate, is based on the scores that the validators receive back from benchmarking the miners.
What is your plan for the interaction between the people that are renting and the capital flow from those rental purchases and the subnet token on 27?
So you're essentially saying like you're essentially saying yeah, sorry Don, we kind of have like this delay.
How do you move what's your intention for the revenue generated from the subnet?
Okay, perfect question. Okay, this is something that we've been thinking about quite a bit, right? We've been thinking between recycling the revenue or burning the revenue. It honestly depends on the market dynamics and where the environment is, right? Because we don't want to just take all the revenue and just recycle it and then continuously extend like halving events and then continuously like put these tokens back into circulation in the future, right? We also need to think about like how we can reduce this potential dilution by just like burning said tokens when revenue is produced at specific intervals. Like in a bull market when there's like the token is performing very well and there's a lot of demand for the GPUs, right? Then we could think of starting to like use that revenue to then recycle, like pretty much saving for a rainy day, right? And then when it's a bear market, then it's like it makes more sense to take the revenue and essentially burn it, so then we can reduce total supply and it could potentially reduce the time to essentially have that happening. But yeah, this is the question that's like we're constantly like going back and forth about, and like I really think that this is something that needs to be solved by the community. Like you make a great point that these subnets are co-owned now, right? It's not just on us to decide, what to do with the revenue. I feel like it should be decided on by the entire community as a whole, right? So then we could stay aligned.
What is the interaction between subnet 27, the stake value there, and this DAO that you were speaking about, Don? And like, how is that working right now? Where is this DAO being formed? Is it on the BitTensor blockchain? What's the structure of it? What control does it have?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So like we're seeing how you guys like structured like the DAO for BitTensor in theory, where it's like OpenTensor posts these proposals and then the validators they vote on it and then the stakers vote with their stake based on like, whichever validators essentially aligning with what they're voting for. And that's essentially the same idea that we have, where like the thing that we want to like we want the community to vote on is essentially the list of GPUs that we'll support, the amount of incentive that will go to each individual GPU model depending on demand. Also, like even just tweaking specific hyperparameters, like being able to stay in consensus with like the community and what they're looking for, like that's key. And like the model that you guys implemented is makes the most sense, and it's like pretty straightforward to implement at the subnet level as well. So that's the direction we're going towards.
And with the DAO too, like the token does not give you rights to say assets or of the company. What it does do is allows you to to vote on how maybe assets, or not assets, but profits are distributed. So if everyone decides that they want 100% of profits after taxes and expenses for things like services, when we have other providers we need to pay out, because we're not just, I believe that Subnet 27 is going to be our biggest offering, but we're still going to offer, secure compute access through providers like Oracle. And Oracle is going to need to be paid for that access. But 100% of those profits after tax could then go back to buyback of the token to increase the value of the overall.
Paying attention to the time here, and we also have Yubo to come on the stage and speak. You mentioned
We have done some really cool experimentation with trying to use some child hotkeys in an off-label manner, right? They're intended for validators. To properly store enough machines. The issue with that is we wouldn't be able to put enough machines on each UID still, because we do plan on and we will store that we will store secondary UIDs in a publicly accessible database that is shared between all validators, and the validators will have an API to keep the database secure to be able to store that information. And then from there, in 2025, it's going to be kind of an over-engineered miner in the beginning. This year, we will have K3s and Kubernetes running a control plane, a miner, probably by a VM using KubeVirt instead of using Docker containers, and that's for security purposes. But it'll also allow us to run a secondary Kubernetes layer. So, like, let's say on one machine, if you guys look in the document on the very far right side, there's some physical machine layouts there, and essentially, our miner will have Kubernetes, the control plane. It'll have also a hotkey controller service that'll be built in a Docker container, and that is for managing all of the, the wallets and anything that goes with that. Now you can have multiple machines, and our validator will actually know which ones have a control plane on them. And so if one goes down, it will keep checking the API endpoints of Kubernetes, similarly to how a load balancer does now. But instead of a load balancer, we can't always guarantee there's going to be a load balancer doing that for us. So we will also have our validator checking the machines it knows that has a control plane, so that if one of your machines goes down, that the rest in your cluster can still communicate with our validators without losing. Kubernetes running. If your miner goes down or your hotkey controller goes down and the machine doesn't go down, it can restart those services. That's going to help with reliability on that scale. And when we scale up, because we're using space spin up those VMs for us, we can then run our own clusters and our own control planes that are separate from them, and we will allocate their specific VMs for just to run that one if someone wants to pay us to do that. So it's kind of almost a nested thing. You have Kubernetes and we're using it, but then since we have the VM
I really do appreciate the community support. I mean, we've been here, I don't know, this has been 4 years. Collins has been quite a journey. I remember even just first thinking about fully trust this in an environment where nobody's trusted. Like that is very, very exciting.
I do have one more thing to say here too. We have also a compute and log in and pay for services. But you'll able to programmatically, anyone across the world can then use us to either scale up what they need to, or use cheap compute with workload. We do need to get our reliability built up a bit more, and I do believe at some point here in 2025 we will be offering that, and even partnering. We're talking Akash is a cornerstone here of, or at least one of the survivable companies that are providing compute in the industry.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah, I just did that. So today I'm presenting BitSec. It's an eco. Who do not know me, I'm John Yu. I'm the founder of this subnet in this project. And I've been a long time participant in crypto. Fifth grade, professionally programming since like 10th grade. So yeah, I've done a lot of different programming, a lot of different crypto type projects. Tracks. And
Like,
during that smart contract development, our team actually ran into a I checked like afterwards, and on like some random weekend I had nothing to do. So I used ChatGPT like 2.5 years ago. And yeah, that basically like launched the journey of what ended up becoming in Web 2, it's hundreds of billions of dollars. In Web 3, it's billions of dollars. Like any mistake can end up like Department of Defense, OpenAI, Anthropic, and a lot of academic institutions that have active funding and research for they just don't really work because week after week we see these like $100 million, like $1 billion hacks that happen all the time. Boards using compute provided by BitTensor and other networks. And there's a we can get back to this later, but just to simplify it, validators take code, clean code, and then find vulnerabilities in a lot of different types of code bases, different languages, different vulnerability types like and it's more like a benchmarking evaluation problem than like a problem of we try to add additional challenges